talking about buying this analog unit.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
but
Uh-huh.
but is digital getting to the place? Now, we said for a long time digital sounds different. We've
Right.
even had a lot of people that say digital sounds better, cleaner.
Uh-huh.
And then we always have people who say, but the analog sound. But are algorithms getting so good with digital products creating the analog sound that it's almost out analoging analog?
That's an interesting one. You know what I'll say to you? I'll say when it comes to efficiency, right? Now with all the technology, I think from an efficiency standpoint, digital is running at 80 miles an hour, like against analog. So let's say, for instance, we look at analog in the race, we look at digital in the race. I'll say analog is up here, but man, that digital it's gaining speed. And a big reason I can say is, for instance, we can look at something like Pro Tools. Pro Tools has that heat function. I don't know if you know about that heat function where basically they have this console kind of style emulation on every single track that you just flick on, and it gives like this analog kind of saturated sound to every single track. And it's them trying to emulate, to my brain, like an analog board. And when you put that thing on, it's whoa, like you notice a difference, you know what I mean, in that sound where they sterilize. It's kind of like it's unsterilizing every track. So I think with things like that, I think we're starting to see where digital is, we're starting to figure out why we love analog so much. It's those nuances, it's that saturation, it's the difference in all of our tracks and things of that nature. I think a lot of people don't notice there's a program called Luna from Universal Audio. And Luna, no one's talking about this, but they have, basically, it's not really a DAW as they've explained it to me, but it's more of a multi-track recorder. And basically, every track, you can throw on a Studer tape. You can throw on console emulations for every single track as soon as you import. So they're kind of even dipping into the place of Luna's more of a board. It's a board, a digital board that has saturation and gives you that feeling. So I think our industry is starting to figure out what we want from analog to bring into that digital space and have that convenience and that efficiency. I think we're headed in that direction. I think digital is gaining some ground for sure now.
5 years ago, I never thought I'd be having this conversation because I'm an absolute analog gearhead. Love all that stuff. And yet, I will be totally honest, I've recently sold almost all of it, all my hardware.
Wow. Isn't that crazy? That's insane.
Because I was finding myself, it was slowing down my workflow, for one, recall and all that kind of stuff. And then but then I started to hear that I could do things with digital that weren't just sounding better, but even more analog than analog. For example, I could have a room full of gear,
right?
But a lot of times these really great analog emulation plugins, they're not just copying a genre of a type of sound. They're flying to London and finding the best box that's ever existed, the famous one from Abbey Road, and they're emulating that one-to-one. Right. So you're pulling in the best box from that London studio, and you're pulling that best box from that LA studio and that best box from that New York studio, and then they're all at your fingertips. It would be impossible to have that kind of gear.
The access to it. I say the same thing. Yeah.
And when it gets to the point where I compare back and forth between the box I have and the other box, and I'm going,
ooh, see, in your case, with you having so much analog gear, that's an amazing kind of way, because you can genuinely sit there and compare, you can listen and say, hey, if there's just a marginal difference, like something very marginal, I'm gonna go with the digital and keep that in my workflow, because guess what? I can turn that on and off. Recall is easy. It's more efficient. Yeah, if for analog for digital to surpass my analog gear, there has to be a stark difference. You know what I mean? It has to be like, okay, I just can't get this sound out of the plugin. But when we're talking about the plugin being in a space where it's like, I can't tell, yeah, I'm gonna go with the plugin 9 times out of 10. I'm just gonna go with the plugin. I understand that. So I totally get that. For me, the only analog gear I have right now today is my Dangerous 2-Bus Plus summing amp, because I still love the sound of summing. You know what I mean? Something about being able to stem everything out, separate it, and then get that back in, there's something about it. I have my Neve Master Portico bus that has saturation, stereo widening, and things. And then I have my Prism, which we talked about for a conversion. I've been in a place where I've been like finding my essential pieces where I'm like, they haven't figured this out yet.
Yeah.
And they haven't figured that out yet. And I'm just keeping those things in place. But like I said, I don't need much now. Like I really don't.
Before all the gearheads that are listening to this light fire to the channel, I will say that there's still a lot of great analog gear that hasn't been emulated yet. And I totally respect people that say, hey, I just want to get my hands on knobs. That's what feels good to me.
I totally understand.
But what I think is valuable about the conversation, though, is I think there's a lot of people out there who think the price of entry has to do with gear into this industry of doing high-level stuff, high-level engineering and producing. You have to have $1 million room and you have to have millions of dollars worth of gear. And I think that's a mental barrier for a lot of people wanting to get into this. And as far as I'm going with this, I'm not trying to tell anyone to stop using analog. I'm saying if you can't do that, you need to realize that digital's gotten so good that not only can you create great sounding stuff, you can create analog sounding stuff that could compete with the best stuff that's out there. And there shouldn't be you shouldn't have that mental barrier over price to entry.
It's very true. You back. Very true. I say the same thing. I'm like, hey man, I can tell you, go get yourself a Waves Gold bundle, get you a DAW, and my man, you could have a dog in this fight. You know what I mean? Like I always felt, I'm like, you could have a horse in this race, like hands down. I've seen people do some amazing things with the most minimal of things. I think what blows my mind is when I watch some of my favorite engineers pull up a plugin, then I'm like, they use that EQ, like something that I'm just like, what? Like I have that EQ. I didn't think about that. You know what I mean? It's just, I think knowing your tools is what's important.
So we do these Fix the Mix challenges every month at mastering.com. And a lot of times people will be like, can you just use stock plugins on the whole mix? And we're like, yeah, no problem. I'll just use Logic stock plugins for the whole thing. And people are that surprises to everyone because everyone thinks it's about the plugin. It's about the next thing. And yes, there are plugins that are great, right? There are some limitation. But if you know your tools,
you're good to go.
It doesn't matter. You could use stock stuff and create great sounding. There's producers out there proving that. You see it all the time.
Oh, yeah. When I watch, for instance, one of my favorite mix engineers, when I watch Leslie Brathwaite mix, and I see him pop open the stock Pro Tools EQ, I'm always like, what? When I first saw him do it, I was like, is that this? What is he doing? And it sounds great. I see him using it on a Drake vocal. Bro, what? That taught me. I add plugins to my arsenal, but I'm very intentional with what I add, where I'm like, I'm looking for something. I'm not really looking for replacements unless they really make something groundbreaking, whereas, oh no, that's a new EQ style that I think could work for my workflow. I ask myself why I buy these things. I'm always looking for certain things to add to my workflow. So when it comes to saturation plugins, that's my big ones, where I'm like, oh, this right here, DAWs haven't really nailed the stock saturation plugins too well. So that's been something that's been very third party for me.
Thanks for watching this clip from the Reverse Engineer podcast. If you want to watch the whole podcast, just click right here. It will take you to the full version, or you can listen to it wherever you listen to your podcasts. Also, if you have any questions about mastering.com, just go ahead and search mastering.com. You can learn all about what we do over there for the students that we work with and the community that we're trying to build. Thanks again for listening.